Checking to make sure we have recording. Okay, it's recording. Hi, everyone. So welcome to Make Your Website More Accessible with These Simple Steps. It's presented by Avi Advani. I hope I pronounced that right. Web Accessibility Specialist at the California Community College Accessibility Center. This presentation, participants will learn about the importance of accessible websites, understand how people with disabilities use the web, review the 5 common accessibility issues, and learn impactful steps to improve accessibility at their own institution. All right, Avi, take it away. I'll screen sharing now.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me share my screen real quick and we can get started. Great. Again, my name is Avi Advani. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Web Accessibility Specialist here in the Accessibility Center. And my topic today is make your website more accessible with these simple steps. A little more about me. I am a new face here in the Accessibility Center, like my colleagues are. I have over 15 years of experience in accessibility in higher education. Most recently, I worked at San Francisco State, where I worked in both accessibility and accommodation. To describe myself for the non-visual user or folks who are on their cell phones or mobile phones, I am a middle-aged brown man. I have dark brown hair, definitely balding. And today I'm wearing a gray sweater with a yellow t-shirt underneath. A little bit more about this session. A lot of the topics today that I'm going to go over are very high level. However, I do provide further resources on these topics throughout my presentation. But because you don't have access to my presentation, I've gone ahead and actually created a Google Doc with all of the links and references that I'm going to talk about in today's presentation. So hopefully soon one of my colleagues will share the link to the Google Doc in the chat if you'd like to follow along. If not, that's totally fine. Once you do get access to these slides, you will be able to access all the links and references. In terms of questions, I do ask that you please hold all live questions for the end. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. However, if you have any burning questions or want to ask any questions in the chat, please feel free as I'm presenting. If they aren't answered, I will answer them at the end of the presentation. Okay, let's go over the agenda for today. First, I'm going to talk about what accessibility is in terms of the web and why is it important. I'll then talk about how people with disabilities use the web, followed by a short video. I'll then move into evaluating web accessibility, followed by a little activity for all of you to participate in, which will then lead me into the 5 most common accessibility errors. Finally, actually before that, I'll talk about the Accessibility Center resources that we offer to the entire system. And the final topic before Q&A will be the steps you can take to improve web accessibility. So let's begin. So what is web accessibility? There are several definitions out there, but I like this one the best. I call it web accessibility is the inclusive practice of reducing barriers on websites so people with disabilities can equitably use the web and web-based resources. I like this definition because it talks about inclusion, equity, and reducing barriers, which is really important. Okay, the next slide is going to talk about why is accessibility important. Now, this is really the theme of today's workshop is why accessibility is important. So one thing I wanted to say is, 1 in 4 adults in the US has a disability per the CDC. Pair that with websites being the first point of contact for our customers means that we might exclude almost 25% of the population. And by customers, I mean prospective students, their parents, alumni, donors, and even the current students and employees at the CCC. It also reinforces the CCC vision of success and commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And the bottom line is here is we want all students to be able to succeed regardless of their background. Accessibility also helps those without disabilities. Much like physical accessibility features help everyone, and a good example of this is curb cuts, for example, web accessibility also helps those without disabilities. And I will go over a few examples of that in a little bit. Finally, we are required to do it. Accessibility is the law, and we are required to follow federal and state laws on accessibility. Okay, a couple of caveats before I move on accessibility. The first is accessibility is not a yes or no answer. Rather, it is a continuum from less accessible to more accessible. More accessibility means increased access for more users, and of course, vice versa for less accessible. A lot of folks like to ask the question, is this accessible? Is this product accessible? And the answer is always going to be maybe. It might be more accessible or less accessible. It's not an absolute. Second, accessibility is the most effective baked in. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's easier to build accessibility in mind when in technology in the beginning rather than fix the issues at the end. You might wonder why I have a blueberry muffin on my screen over here. And the reason is I like to use the blueberry muffin analogy when talking about accessibility. Think of accessibility as the blueberries in a blueberry muffin. Now, when you're making a blueberry muffin, are you including the blueberries in with the batter before you bake the muffin? Or are you baking a plain muffin and then stuffing the blueberries in at the end after it's been baked? Not sure about you all, but I prefer my blueberries baked in, and therefore accessibility is more delicious or easier to use when it is baked in. Okay, blueberry muffins aside, let's move on to the next topic, which is how people with disabilities use the web. There are four broad categories of disability that I want to talk about. The first is visual. So those are folks who are, blind or low vision, or perhaps have color blindness. You have folks with hearing disabilities, so deaf or hard of hearing. We have folks with mobility disabilities. In that case, they usually have a limited manipulation on using their arms or legs. And finally, you have cognitive disabilities, and that's folks who have learning disability, ADHD, autism, and so on. And this happens to be the largest group and also contains the most invisible disabilities, as we've learned earlier today. So how do people with disabilities use the web? And the answer is, it varies. Some examples are, you have assistive technology. So folks who are blind might use a screen reader that reads their screen back to them. Folks with a mobility disability might use voice control software because they can't use a keyboard or mouse. They can use that to control the computer. We also have adaptive devices. So that's a standard device that's been modified for an individual. So say I only have one arm, I might use a one-handed keyboard or a different input device for the mouse. And finally, in most cases, it could just be a standard computer with no specialized software or hardware. Now, because the use of how people use the web varies from person to person, this is why accessibility is so important, because it makes it easier for everyone to participate, regardless of how they interact with the web. So I promised you some examples of accessibility benefiting all. So first, captions not only help those who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they also help someone who's a non-native speaker, perhaps, or those who have their sound off. If you're in public and you're watching a video and don't want to disturb everyone, you want to turn your sound off, and captions help you as well. Alternative text appears when images don't load in certain browsers. So if you have a poor internet connection, at least you get to understand what information is missing from that page. And finally, good color contrast improves readability for everyone. Even if you have perfect vision, trying to read white text on a lime green background isn't going to be very easy, and therefore it benefits everyone when text is more readable. Now, to further reinforce the point of it helping everyone, I wanted to share a short video of keyboard compatibility. This is a video in a series of videos from the Web Accessibility Initiative, or WAI, where they talk about more than just keyboard. They talk about all different types of accessibility features and how they help everyone. So with that, let me quickly switch over to this video. I'm sorry, is my screen sharing paused for any reason?
Yes, on
Right
my
now, we're not.
screen.
Apologies. Let me reshare and do that again and start over.
Web accessibility perspectives. Keyboard compatibility. Not being able to use your computer because your mouse doesn't work is frustrating. Many people use only the keyboard to navigate websites, either through preference or circumstance. Whether it's temporarily limited mobility, a permanent physical disability, or simply a broken mouse, the result is the same. Websites and apps need to be operable by keyboard. Web accessibility. Essential for some, useful for all. Visit w3.org/WAI/perspectives for more information on keyboard compatibility. Web accessibility.
Okay, so I hope that, again, drove home the point of how accessibility benefits everyone, especially keyboard accessibility. All right, let's move on to our next topic, which is evaluating web accessibility. We talked about accessibility in theory. How do we actually tell if something is more accessible or less accessible? Accessibility is measured using accessibility standards. Our system is required to follow the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG 2.0 AA standard. A lot of words, but essentially, WCAG 2 is the most widely accepted worldwide standard. I've included a link over here to learn more about WCAG, but essentially it's organized into 4 principles with about 12 to 13 guidelines. And within those guidelines, you have accessibility tests or success criteria that help you determine whether something's accessible. So speaking of testing, in terms of testing for accessibility, you have human evaluation and automated evaluation. Now, automated evaluations account for at most 30% of accessibility tests that exist. Even if the tool is really good, it's only going to get 30% of the tests. Whereas human evaluation accounts for the rest of the tests. Now, as you can imagine, automated evaluations is using computer software, so it's much easier to do. However, it does not give you the full picture. And that's where human evaluation comes in, which again, is a bit more resource intensive. However, together, they can give you a really good idea of how accessible something is. Here's why I want to introduce the Wave browser extension. It is an automated evaluation tool that identifies accessibility errors within your web browser. It's created by this company called WebAIM, which is an organization that specializes in accessibility. They're one of our partners, and they offer plenty of free resources on how to be more accessible. The reason I wanted to introduce this extension today is because a lot of the tools we offer in the Accessibility Center are based on the Wave platform. So having a good base knowledge of Wave is going to help you, especially if you want to go further in accessibility and use our tools. One of my colleagues hopefully will paste in the chat the link to download the Wave browser extension. It works on Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. The screenshot that I've shared here as well, it just shows you what it would look like if you run Wave in your browser. It gives you a list of the errors, the contrast errors, and other features on the web page. So super helpful tool. Speaking of WebAIM, the ones who make Wave, I wanted to talk about the WebAIM Million project. This project is essentially an accessibility review of the home pages for the top 1 million websites worldwide. Essentially, what they've done is they evaluated these pages using a version of the Wave tool. So it's a fully automated evaluation, but it still provides a good picture of how accessibility is going worldwide. It gives us a really good insight into the current state of accessibility. And also, because it's done this for 4 years, it gives you a good insight into the trends over time. It's the 4th consecutive year, and in this February or March, they will probably have their 5th consecutive year of this project. So this is a very complicated table, it looks like at first glance, but I wanted to talk through the results of the WebAIM Million project. Now, on the rows of the left-hand side, you have the WCAG failure types. This is a partial list, but these are essentially these top 5 errors I'm going to be talking about later on in the presentation. The columns on the right are essentially the percentage of home pages that have these errors on them. And this goes back to the last 4 years. So for example, last year, 83.9% of homepages had low contrast text errors. And again, I mentioned before, it shows you a good improvement over time. So for example, in 2019, 68% of homepages had missing alternative text for images, whereas this past year, only 55.4% of homepages had this error. This is where we go into our activity for today. How is your institution or college doing? I'd like you all to visit the WebAIM projects lookup page. Type in the URL of your college or district, or if you can't find them, your favorite website will do just fine. Review the number of accessibility errors that were detected. And finally, answer the Zoom poll. I'm also going to show you how to do this, just so we're all on the same page. Let me move over. So once you get to this page, you can just type in the URL of the website. You don't have to use www or HTTP. And this example, I'm using Wikipedia, and I click on the View Homepage Data button. If there are multiple domains, it's going to give you an option to select from one of them. I prefer just the top Wikipedia. I click on that, and then I get to see a bunch of information about the page. And if you scroll down a little bit below, you will see the number of accessibility errors detected. What I'd like you all to do is to essentially answer my short poll in terms of how many accessibility errors were detected on the page that you chose. So let me launch the poll right now. And I'll give you all a few minutes to do this. If you have any questions, please do feel free to chime in the chat or speak up. But I'm seeing a lot of answers coming in already, which is great.
What if your domain, your school isn't on there?
Pick your favorite website that
Okay.
you like to visit. Okay, so far I have 16 responses, and we have over 150 people. So I'll give it some more time. And I saw Michael's comment in the chat. Michael, you will not be reported. My previous institution, I'm proud to say, had 0 errors. So don't be afraid to put 0. And yes, we will not share these results. This is just for demonstration purposes only. Okay, we are seeing a few more trickle in. We're up to 34. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now so we can all take a look at, oh, is it taking time? Sorry. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes then. I think all of us hitting at one point is kind of crashing the website. I'm seeing some technical issues in the chat. That's okay. You can always go back later and take a look. But let me end the poll right now for the sake of time. And I'm going to share the results so you can all see. So quite a few of you actually had 0 errors, which is pretty impressive, but not super surprising, which is okay. But a lot of the websites that I'm seeing definitely have, more than 0 errors, and some have a lot more than 16. The reason for that is, again, mistakes happen. Accessibility isn't perfect, and also could mean that a website does not really care about accessibility or hasn't got a chance to go around and fix their accessibility issues. So let me stop the poll and go back to my presentation. So essentially, if the websites that you picked had more than 5 errors, there's a good chance that one of those errors would be in the 5 most common accessibility errors I'm going to go over next. So just to summarize what they are, is missing alternative text for images, low contrast text, empty links, missing form labels, and empty buttons. Okay, the first issue is missing alternative text. What this means is that images are missing their text equivalents or alternative text. Why is it important? That's because it's difficult for people with visual disabilities to understand the information contained in the image. If you were here for the previous session on social media, a good example of an image that needs description is a meme. Without having the context of what's going on in that image, someone with visual disability will have no idea what's going on and miss the context. You can use automated tools to find and ensure that all relevant images have descriptive alternative text. A couple of notes here is relevant images. Not all images require alternative text. If an image is for decorative purposes only, it does not need alternative text. The second point is this shows the drawback of automated tools. An automated tool cannot tell you whether the image is relevant or not. It also will only tell you whether the image has alternative text or not. It cannot tell you how valuable or good quality the alternative text is, which is why, again, you need human or manual evaluations and testing. A great resource for more on alternative text I've provided here from WebAIM. They have a wonderful article on how to write the most succinct and descriptive alternative text. So if you're interested, please follow that link. The next issue is low color contrast for text. What this means is there's insufficient contrast between the text and the background. This is important because it's difficult for people with visual disabilities to read text on websites. You can use, again, automated tools to ensure that there is adequate color contrast. WCAG requires a ratio of 4.5 to 1 color contrast for most text. Now, the way color contrast work is the higher the ratio, the better the contrast. One cool thing with the Wave tool is that it also has a built-in color contrast tester where you can play with different values of the foreground and the background, and it will even tell you if it passes or fails the WCAG standard for contrast. If you'd like to learn more about color contrast, I've again included a resource that links to WebAIM. Issue 3, empty links. This is really common on websites where links have no text. The example I'm using here is essentially the social media icons being used that link to the different social media websites. This is important because link text is needed for providing context to people with disabilities, not just visual disabilities, but cognitive disabilities and some mobility disabilities. Because again, if you aren't sure where the link is taking you, you're less likely to click on that link, especially in the days today of phishing and spam emails. Again, automated tools will help you find empty links. However, the fix might be a little bit more complicated and require access to website code. So if you don't have access to modify the code of your website, you might want to contact the IT department or someone who's in charge of essentially your website to make the fix. If you'd like to learn more, again, I'm including a resource here to PopeTech that has that talks more about the empty link examples. Issue 4, missing form fields. So what this means is that form fields are missing corresponding labels. This is important because for us visual users, if you come across a form on a page, you can easily visually associate the label with the form field. So if I see name with a text box, I know that my name has to go in the text box. However, if I don't programmatically associate that label with the text box, I will have no context for what that text field is meant for. And again, it helps non-visual users understand the purpose of the form field. Again, an automated tool like Wave can help you find missing labels. And again, it might require you having access to the website code to fix. But if you're interested in learning more, you can review WebAIM's resource on creating accessible forms. Issue 5, empty buttons. This is common on websites where icons are used as buttons. The example I've used here in the screenshot is a search field with a magnifying glass icon at the end that it doesn't have essentially text on the button. Again, this button text is needed to provide much needed context to people with disabilities. If I don't know where the button is going to go or what it does, I'm not clicking on the button just because, again, I'm very wary of things on the internet, right? So again, you can use an automated tool to find empty buttons, might require access to the code to fix, but again, I've included a resource from Pope Tech on what empty buttons look like and how to fix the issues. Okay, if that felt like a lot of information, that's okay. This is where I plug how we're here to help you and talk about the resources we have to offer. First, we offer the tools. The first tool is the Pope Tech website scanning tool. What this tool does is it scans multiple websites and web pages for accessibility errors. Think of it as using Wave on multiple websites, but it's done automatically for you and given to you in a really easy to understand format. This tool is based on the Wave tool again, so all the results you get will be in the Wave results format. If you'd like access to this tool, you can email us and we can provide access to you or folks on your college as well. Next is the Pope Tech Instructor Accessibility Guide. Think of this tool as Wave, but for Canvas pages. Essentially, it scans Canvas pages for accessibility errors and prompts content authors to make the necessary changes. Now, the one drawback of this tool is that it only does page by page, unlike the website scanning tool. And if you do want access to this tool, it does require that your LMS or Canvas admin enable it, but once it's enabled, it'll work for the entire institution. If you'd like to learn more or want access to this tool, please send us an email and we'll be happy to do that for you. We also offer training. We have a number of self-paced courses. We have Accessibility Basics, which is a great place to start for anyone who's getting started in accessibility. We have a course on how to use the Pope Tech Instructor Accessibility Guide in Canvas. And finally, we have a really exciting course, the Document Accessibility course from our partners at WebAIM. It's an excellent course. A lot of accessibility principles in making accessible documents also apply to websites. So I highly recommend this course. It is self-paced. You have about 60 working days, business days to complete the course. And once you complete the course, you receive a certificate of completion. Excuse me. We also offer live training. So on the same topics we talked about, we offer live training to colleges on accessibility basics and also on how to use the Pope Tech Instructor Accessibility Guide. And then additional resources we offer, we have multiple mailing lists. We have one specifically for accessibility for websites. We have the Vision Resource Center where we have an accessibility forum that you can ask and answer questions from your colleagues. And finally, our email address, which is accessibility@ccctechcenter.org, where you can request access to the tools or request more information. One thing I wanted to plug, which you might have heard about earlier today, is the Accessibility Capability Maturity Model. This is a set of goals and milestones that help measure where colleges are in accessibility and help them build capacity to be more accessible in the future. This is really important for websites because a lot of the web processes should have accessibility embedded in them to be most efficient. So we're piloting a few colleges in the spring and probably rolling it out in the fall. So please stay tuned for more information. Okay, that takes me to our last topic, which is steps you can take to improve web accessibility. Step one, start small. Install the Wave extension. Use the Wave extension to find and fix accessibility issues on your websites or even parts of a website that you have control over. If you're using Canvas, Canvas does have a built-in accessibility checker. If you'd like to learn more, again, I've included a link in my Google Doc, but essentially the built-in checker also does a pretty good job of telling you how you can make your Canvas page more accessible. So when you install the Wave extension or use the Canvas tool, focus on the issues that you can fix, that you have access to be able to fix. The goal here really is to get comfortable with accessibility tools and how to make these accessibility fixes. Once you're comfortable, we talk about step two, which is expand your impact. Request access to the Pope Tech website scanning tool so you can scan multiple pages or multiple websites. If you're using Canvas, you can request access to the Pope Tech Instructor Accessibility Guide, because it's a bit more user-friendly than the built-in Canvas tool. And again, here, the idea is to focus on fixing all the automated accessibility issues that have been discovered by these tools. If you're feeling adventurous, please go ahead and try some manual evaluation. You can try checking for the quality of the alternative text. Verify that the videos you are linking to have captions. Make sure the link text has good quality or explains where the link is going. And you can also test the entire website for accessibility using the keyboard only to see where you stand. At some point, you are going to get stuck and you can move forward or you need more assistance. That's where I say step 3 is use our resources. You are not expected to have all the answers. We don't have all the answers sometimes, so it's really okay to ask for help. We are here to help you. We offer the tools, the training, and the resources on accessibility. So we're here and we're a partner in accessibility. Step 4, create accessible content. Again, accessibility is the most effective when it's built in or baked in. So when you are launching some new projects, plan for accessibility when you're creating new websites or web content or even new courses. A lot of our resources actually focus on accessibility from the beginning in creating accessible content rather than fixing it at the end. So that's when you'll get the most use of our resources. And step 5, get your colleagues involved. You don't have to be a lone warrior. Encourage your colleagues to attend our workshops, monthly office hours, and our other events. Or if you'd like, gather a group on your college for a live training from us. The more people you get involved, the more accessibility culture will change in your college, and the more it's going to be easier for someone new coming in to understand accessibility and build it in. So speaking of collaboration, one more plug for the CCC Community of Accessibility Allies, which is our community hosted by the Accessibility Center. We call it C4A2. The second meeting is February 15th from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. To register, I'm sure a link will be put in the chat shortly. We have breakout rooms. We plan to have breakout rooms by the area of interest. So we have procurement, digital content. I'll be hosting the web one. We have DSPS and alt media. One thing to note is if you attended the first meeting, you have automatically been added to the listserv. So there's no need to ask to sign up to it again. With that, I'm finishing my slides. Thank you so much for your attention and time, and I'm happy to open it up to any live questions or any questions in the chat. Let me see the chat real quick. A lot of love for Pope Tech, which is excellent.
Hey, Avi, one of them came to me.
Yes.
Yep, got a question here. This is about the WAVE tool. Does the WAVE tool offer further information on any accessibility errors it finds?
That's a good question. WAVE is a really easy to use tool. And what I'm going to do actually is show you how the WAVE tool works. So I pick a website, I click on the little W button once it's installed, and I instantly get results on accessibility of the page. So if I click on the details, every single accessibility error or feature or information has a little eye icon next to it. And you click on the eye icon, it gives you all the information of what that means and how you can get more information on the topic. So again, it's an excellent tool. It's a great tool to get started on accessibility because it makes everything really easy on how to use. Hope that helped.
Yep. Well, I got another one in here. Do all errors and alerts need to be fixed? I mean, are there some issues that are not mandatory to change, or there are different levels of severity?
Very good question, Sylvia. Essentially, the WAVE tool is built on the WCAG rule set. So now again, WAVE is an automated tool. So if it says it's an error and it's not actually an error, that's when the human evaluation comes in. But yes, in most cases, if Wave throws an error, it means that that issue needs to be fixed. An alert generally means that the issue is not an error, but it might need some human or manual evaluation. So it's super helpful when you get an alert to click into that to see what it means and perhaps do a manual review of that error so you know how to fix it. If it's not an error, it's okay, you can ignore it. I'm seeing one more question in the chat. Have you used Google's Lighthouse? If so, what's your opinion of it? Terry, I actually have not used Google's Lighthouse, so I don't have an opinion on it. But from what I understand and from what I hear it's also a really good tool. It's, again, there are several automated tools out there. And if you're a developer, you would use a different tool than if you were an end user. And that's why I introduced Wave today, because I think Wave is, the best tool for most people. And also the Wave tool gives you a test on the final product, whereas the other tools tend to help you as you're developing a product. Any other questions? Monique saying she likes Andy herself. Yep, that's another tool you can use. That's an automated tool that's used specifically in the trusted tester process for Section 508 testing. Any more questions that I have not addressed in the chat? It's a long chat, so I do apologize. I'm going to have to scroll up a little bit. Okay, and I do apologize for the slowness with the WebAIM tool. I think, again, all of us hitting it at one point probably is causing it to crash. But you can always go back later and try your favorite website. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop share and see if there are any final questions. If not, I think I will call this the end of the presentation. Thank you again so much for your time and attention today. I really appreciate it.